Morning. Now, our first guest helped to run Rishi Sunak's leadership campaign. He's a close friend of the Prime Minister. So, no surprises that Oliver Dowden is now back in Cabinet with a critical role because, as Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, he's responsible for coordinating delivery across government. And he joins us now. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. Let's start off with a bit of good news, shall we? Or as some would say, good news. We're going to get an extra bank holiday.
Yes, it's fantastic news. And I think that the coronation is a mixture of the sacred and the solemn. It's the crowning of our new king, but also it's a moment for celebration. And just as we did with the coronation some 70 years ago, there's another opportunity for the nation to come together, whether that's as families or communities, to celebrate our new king. And I think it'll be a fantastic occasion.
They cost money, though, don't they, bank holidays?
Well, of course, there is some cost associated with it in terms of factories and so on not operating, but there's a huge boost, for example, to hospitality and tourism. But really the key point here is that this is our new king, the first time we've had a new king crowned for 70 years. And I think most people up and down the country would want to take an opportunity to celebrate it. And I think it's right that we should have a bank holiday.
Now, I'm keen to talk a bit more about what we can expect from a Rishi Sunak premiership. But before we get to that, there's a story in the Sunday newspapers that we do need to discuss. Gavin Williamson, the Cabinet Office Minister, and he's working, of course, in your department. Now, he is being investigated for alleged bullying and intimidating behaviour towards Wendy Morton, the former Chief Whip. Astonishingly, it seems that this was all about the fact that he hadn't been invited to the funeral of the Queen. And these messages that are in the Sunday Times this morning include him saying it's disgusting that you are using her death to punish people. He obviously thought that she wasn't giving him an invite for political reasons. He said, let's see how many more times you is all over. There is a price for everything. What's your reaction to these messages?
Well, these were sent in the heat of the moment, expressing frustration. It was a difficult time for the party. I think he now accepts that he shouldn't have done it and he regrets doing so. And I think that's right. And thankfully, we're in a bit of a better place now as a party.
It sounds a bit threatening, though, doesn't it? There's a price for everything. What's that supposed to mean?
Well, remember, this was Gavin Williamson when he was a backbencher expressing his frustrations at a difficult time for the party with the then Chief Whip. He regrets the language that he uses, and I don't think he should have used that sort of language. But nonetheless, that is in the past now, and now, thankfully, we're in a better place as a party.
It's not very long ago. It's not like it was 3 years ago. It was just a matter of kind of weeks ago, if you like. And also, most people would look at this and say, OK, everyone gets frustrated at work. Most people wouldn't send those kind of messages to a colleague. Does Rishi Sunak have confidence in him?
Well, he shouldn't have sent those messages, and he says that he regrets it. But, of course, the Prime Minister continues to have confidence in Gavin Williamson as Minister. OK,
so Jake Berry, the former party chair, says that he told Rishi Sunak about this complaint the day before he was appointed to the Cabinet. Is that true?
Well, I don't think it was any secret that Gavin Williamson and other backbenchers had a difficult relationship with the Chief Whip, but it's not the case...
So was he told it?
It is not the case that the Prime Minister saw this exchange of text messages until they were leaked to newspapers last night.
But he was aware of the allegation?
Well, he was aware that there was a difficult relationship between the Chief Whip and a number of backbenchers, of which Gavin Williamson was one.
But did he know that she had accused the former Chief Whip, Gavin Williamson, of bullying her? Did he know that allegation?
Well, he knew that there was a difficult relationship between them. Now, clearly, there is a complaints process which is ongoing at the Conservative Party, which I'm not part, and I can't cut across that individual complaints mechanism.
Did he know the complaint had been made?
Well, the Prime Minister knew that there was a difficult relationship,
That's
and I think as you've seen from the former chairman Jake Berry, he says that he highlighted that to the Prime Minister. But in terms of these specific allegations, this specific exchange, the Prime Minister wasn't aware of it until last night.
I just want to look at Gavin Williamson's career. This is a man who kept a tarantula in his desk when he was Chief Whip. He was fired as Defence Secretary by Theresa May for leaking sensitive national security information. He was then fired as Education Secretary by Boris Johnson over the exams fiasco during COVID. He was put back in the Cabinet by Rishi Sunak and then immediately caught in an alleged bullying scandal. What was it about Gavin Williamson's record in government that made Rishi Sunak think, yes, I want that man in my Cabinet?
Well, I actually think you can see in the government that Rishi Sunak formed as Prime Minister, he brought together people from all across the Conservative Party. He brought supporters of Liz Truss, he brought supporters of Boris Johnson, he brought people that supported him on his
campaign. Specifically about Gavin
and I think
Williamson.
Gavin Williamson has played a big part in the Conservative Party, and I think it's right that he should be as part of that team that brings together all parts of the Conservative Party.
So it's got nothing to do with the fact that he played an instrumental role in Rishi Sunak's campaign to become Prime Minister?
Well, I think you can see in the government that Rishi Sunak formed that he was bringing together all different parts of the Conservative Party, and Gavin forms part of that.
OK. Now, let's move on, shall we? You are incredibly close to the Prime Minister, of course. I know you're going to be plugged into what we can expect from a Rishi Sunak premiership. He's talked a lot about levelling with the public, about the difficult decisions ahead. So really, I guess this is your opportunity to do that. Should we be bracing ourselves for a return to austerity?
Well, look, we face very difficult times as a country, not least because of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine and as we recover from COVID. And at the heart of that, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, have put restoring stability. And that's absolutely essential because, for example, if we allow inflation to get out of control, mortgage rates to get out of control, everyone is going to suffer and the poorest will suffer the worst. So it's right that we take difficult decisions. I have to say to you and your viewers, there will be, unfortunately, more significant difficult decisions to come in the autumn statement the week after next. But at the same time, at the heart of all of that, as the Prime Minister demonstrated during COVID, compassion is at the heart of what he's doing and protecting the most vulnerable. And I think those are the parameters of that autumn statement. It is about difficult decisions, but also protecting the most vulnerable. Should
most of us expect to be paying more tax?
Well, I think we're going to have to face difficult decisions both on the tax side. We haven't got to the end of the difficult decisions there, and difficult decisions on the spending side. Now, of course, in terms of the specific decisions that will be made, that conversation is ongoing between the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, and you wouldn't expect any government minister to comment before the autumn statement itself.
I know you'll say you can't comment. Sunday Telegraph saying the Chancellor is looking at reducing pension tax relief for higher earners. Is that part of the discussion?
Well, Sophie, you've been around these events many times, as I have been. There's an awful lot of speculation in the newspapers. Some of it's correct, some of it's not correct. I can't go into any individual stories, but what I can say is it is the case there will be difficult decisions in that autumn statement.
And previously with austerity, we saw the focus on spending cuts, but it is right, it seems, from what you've and others have said, that actually tax rises are going to form a bigger part than previously.
I wouldn't say as between tax versus spending cuts. We've got to, unfortunately, because of the difficult decisions that we have to take, we're going to have to take difficult decisions on both tax and spending. But of course, as Conservatives, and I know that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor share this view with me, we need to bear down on spending first and eliminate waste, excessive spending, and only go to tax rises if it's a last resort. But given the difficulty of the public finances, there is likely to be a mix of the two.
And what can you give us any, what kind of that mix may be? 50-50? It was 80-20 in favour of spending cuts under George Osborne?
It's not appropriate to get into the detail of that balance, and indeed those conversations are ongoing between the Prime Minister and the Chancellor.
We've been talking a lot about tax cuts so far. I just want to look a little bit at spending because we went to Bradford for the show this week, correspondent Fraser Maud. Liz Truss, of course, promised to build Northern Powerhouse Rail in full, including a £43 billion high-speed line between Leeds, Liverpool and Bradford. I just want to play you what people were talking to us about when we went to Bradford.
I don't think it's going to happen. To get from Leeds to Manchester takes over an hour and costs more than £40 a return journey. It's impractical to not have the two biggest, most financial centres in the north not linked together by over an hour.
Do you think they're committed to upgrading the north?
No, they haven't got no thoughts about that at all. They're not thinking at all.
Bradford
get up off your bums and get up here and see what they can do for us.
Rishi Sunak's talked a lot about the mandate from the 2019 election, all about levelling up outside of London. And you can see there from Bradford, people are really worried you're going to go back on it.
Well, we're committed to honouring our 2019 manifesto, and levelling up forms the heart of it. And indeed, that was a manifesto that was agreed by the Prime Minister and indeed by me and other members of the Cabinet with the Prime Minister. We remain fully committed to honouring our manifesto commitments. However, of course, that is in the context of a very difficult financial situation. But I can assure you that the autumn statement will continue our commitment to levelling up.
Including Northern Powerhouse Rail in full?
Well, it's tempting to get drawn into each and every announcement. I've said that difficult decisions will have to be taken, but in taking those difficult decisions, we will be very cognizant of the duty that we owe to people that voted for us, often for the first time in 2019, backed a manifesto that included levelling up, and you will see levelling up being honoured in that manifesto, in that autumn statement.
Now, Rishi Sunak is going to COP, the climate summit in Egypt. He's pledged to make the UK a clean energy superpower. He's also talked about ending our dependence on fossil fuels. Are you still planning to issue more than 100 new drilling licences for oil and gas in the North Sea?
Well, I think it is the case that when we face a challenge with oil and gas supply, particularly after the invasion of the Ukraine by Russia and the effect that that's had on oil prices and global oil and gas supply, we should look to make sure that we continue to provide oil and gas from our own resources. But that's not to say we're in any way going soft on renewables. And actually, if you look at our records of government since 2010, according to different estimates, we've had between a 4- and 5-fold increase in renewables. They're now about 40% of our electricity supply, and we're going to continue to press ahead with that, whether that's with huge investment in offshore wind or other measures. You
say offshore wind, but when it comes to onshore wind, you are making it much harder, effectively banning new onshore wind. If you're serious about climate change and you want to make the UK a clean energy superpower, why are you rowing back on onshore wind and drilling more in the North Sea?
Well, we're not rowing back on onshore wind. It has been the case, I think, for about 8 or 10 years that we made sure that local residents' views are properly taken into account in respect of onshore wind. Actually, you can get huge amounts of renewables from offshore. The UK has become a global leader in offshore, and we've increased the renewables as part of the energy mix by about 5-fold while we've been in government. And I think that's the right balance, making sure that we recognise local feelings, but at the same time investing in renewables.
Now, the summit is going on in Egypt. Later on the programme, we are going to be talking to the sister of Alaa Abdel Fattah, who is a British-Egyptian human rights campaigner defender. He's been held in jail on hunger strike. His sister is calling on the UK government to try and do more, to personally talk to the Egyptian president to secure his release. What can you tell us about that case?
Well, it's a very difficult case, and it has been raised by the UK government at every level. And I understand that the Foreign Secretary raised it with his Egyptian opposite number very recently. Clearly, I'm not going to get into individual conversations that the Prime Minister may have while he's at the summit, but I know the Prime Minister is very much aware of it and will raise it as appropriate.
OK, we'll be talking to the sister later in the programme to get her reaction as well. Now, I'm interested to talk to you about your role in government, because you're in charge of resilience planning, which, of course, with the winter approaching, is ever more important. Now, the National Grid has warned that there could be blackouts if temperatures drop sharply, if Russia, of course, cuts off gas and oil supplies to Europe. Have you been wargaming what to do if there are these blackouts?
Well, I lead the Cabinet Office, which is, in a way, the sort of HQ of government. We deal with coordination across government. And, of course, we look at all different scenarios. It is going to be a challenging winter. And, of course, we look at the situation in respect of energy supply. I have to say that, having looked at it, and I know that my colleague in Bays, Grant Shapps, is very much across this as well, we have got robust resilience plans, and I would very much hope that we would not find ourselves in the sort of extreme situation that you describe.
You obviously hope it doesn't happen, but what do those resilience plans look like? I mean, there's been talk about National Grid saying there could be 3-hour blackouts between 4 to 7 p.m. in a worst-case scenario. Is that accurate?
Well, I'm not going to comment on individual scenarios described. What I would say, though, is that the sort of extreme measures that would see a lack of supply are very much at the more unlikely scale of these things happening. So I would say to your viewers and to you that that certainly should not be their expectation of what would happen this winter. We do have robust resilience plans in place.
Another thing that we are perhaps more likely to see is strikes, almost certain to see strikes in different sectors. There are reports in The Observer today that nurses have voted to strike for the first time nationally in their history. What kind of an impact could that have on the health service?
Well, first of all, we don't know whether that is the case, and I very much hope it doesn't turn out to be the case. We have well-oiled contingencies in place, and the Department of Health is across how we would deal with a scenario like that should it arise, and clearly we would make sure that we prioritised the most essential services, emergency services and so on. But of course there would be an impact as a result of a strike like that, and I would continue to urge nurses and others to resist going out on strike even if they have voted to do so. I know these are difficult times, but we have already agreed quite considerable support for nurses.
What would the impact be? Well,
that would depend on the individual hospitals and the scale of the adherence to the strike. But there are well-oiled mechanisms in place to make sure that we seek to minimise as much as possible the disruption to people, particularly those in the most need. But of course, if you're in the situation where you have a large number of nurses going out on strike, of course that is going to have an impact, for example, on some elective surgery and other activities by hospitals. It's just inevitable given the numbers involved.
And of course, the NHS right now already under pressure. I just want to have a look at the current picture for A&E waiting times. This is actually quite shocking. When I saw this graph, I can actually really believe it. This is people who are waiting 12 hours or more in A&E. And the red line at the top is 2022. September, 32,776 people waited more than 12 hours. That's the highest number in records going back to August 2010. I mean, this looks like a health service that is really on the brink here.
Yes, we have very big challenges with the health service. It was only a year ago that we had a global pandemic, and you can see, if you look at those numbers, how that is driving the rise in pressure on A&E.
But it's still going up.
And others. Yes,
it's
of course.
Still going up now in 2022.
Well, first of all, because those effects don't stop when the pandemic hasn't even stopped, but as the effects of the pandemic abate, it is the case that the backlogs continue to increase for some time. That is why the government is investing record sums into the NHS, and the new Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, is absolutely appraised of what we need to do to make sure that we start to bear down on these numbers. For example, just this week we've agreed an extra £500 million, £500 million worth of support to help through this winter period to address exactly this sort of problems. There's a complex range of factors, for example, access to GP services, delayed discharges in relation to social care.
Okay.
And I know that the Health Secretary, indeed the Prime Minister, have got a grip across the board on this.
Quick thought from you. For you, of course, has been by Rishi Sunak's side during a roller coaster year. Do you think that he ever thought that he would have a second chance?
No, I don't think he did. And in a way, I don't think he would have wanted to have had this situation where he came in such difficult times. But I think he and I, and indeed the whole Cabinet, feel a very profound sense of national duty and getting on with the job of dealing with the challenges that this country faces. And I can tell you that's exactly what he's seized of every minute of the day.
OK, thank you very much for being on the programme, Oliver Dowden there.